Okay, well, welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Doctor on Call, the X-Base that's being up and running now for a good few weeks, organised by the Workers' Party. I'm Chris Williamson, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Dr Bob Gill to talk everything NHS this evening. And obviously, we would like listeners to contribute as well. So if you've got anything to say, any questions you want to put to Bob, or a point that you just simply like to make, feel free to put your hand up and I'll bring you in. Or alternatively, you can put something in the chat and we'll try and keep an eye on that as well. And put any points that people put in the chat if you don't want to actually take the microphone. But Bob, I thought we might lead off. I mean, I put in the post, in my post anyway, about tonight's event, that wanted to talk to you about the resident doctors dispute, but also what the NHS are calling an unprecedented flu epidemic. But well, I think we should start really with the junior doctors, or the resident doctors, I think they're now called. And in particular, I'd just like to get your thoughts about what the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said. He said he's had it, didn't he? He said, I've had it with the doctors, and called them a bunch of moaning middies, and in a very sort of patronising way to speak about, highly professional lifesavers. Let's be clear about it, aren't they? This is what they are. And I think he said that the BMA, the British Medical Association, was basically guilty of juvenile delinquency. I mean, look, we've been pretty critical of Wes Streeting on this X-Base previously, Bob. But I mean, has he plumbed a new low with these latest outbursts?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I think the language he's using is to minimize, to put down, to present the BMA and the resident doctors as irresponsible, immature. Anything he can do to smear their reputation, he will do. And I suspect he's been advised that if he sticks to this sort of messaging, it's going to be effective, because the media are very sympathetic. They give him plenty of airtime, and it seems to be that the alternative narrative that we discuss every week on this X-Space is never vocalized either by the BMA or the junior resident doctors that they manage to speak to. I can't help thinking that the BMA genuinely doesn't want to win their dispute, because they're not doing action in what I would call the most effective way. For example, one way might be to coordinate with other health workers, for example, to make the threat of strike action very politically dangerous, a hot potato for government. But at the moment, they seem to be not really caring about patient care. We know that. We outline that every week. And they certainly don't have respect for the workers. So if the only trick up the BMA sleeve is to withdraw their labor and have an impact on patients, there comes a tipping point where the patient sympathy for the medical profession will wear off and will start to decline. And I think that's what Wes Streeting is relying on.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously a hostile media and all sorts of ridiculous stories about greedy doctors and so on. It's funny, isn't it? A few years ago, with the corporate media and these politicians were saying, come out, was it on a Tuesday evening or a Wednesday evening, and show your appreciation for our health workers by applauding in the street. You have this spectacle of the likes of Streeting and Sir Keir Starmer and the rest of the political class, sort of bigging up the medical profession on the one hand, and now they're juvenile delinquents. They're sort of beyond the pale. I mean, it's kind of real double standards, isn't it?
Absolutely, total hypocrisy. When it suited them, when it suited the media and political elite, they were quite happy to pay homage to the healthcare workers who were putting themselves in harm's way potentially from the whole COVID crisis. You had Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock very happy to sing their praises, but actually that didn't materialize in terms of providing them with protective equipment
No.
or upping their salaries to make up for the losses they've suffered since the financial crash of 2008. So it's very opportunistic. There isn't an overriding principle, and they will do whatever it needs to suit their political agenda at that moment. And at that time, when people were very fearful, it would have been political suicide to start criticizing the medical workforce. But now memories are very short, and now they've seen it as an opportune moment to try and discredit and smear the profession. But that I'm not giving the BMA or the medical profession a clean bill of health, because the way they're pursuing this is deemed to fail, because they at every opportunity they steadfastly refuse to paint the picture of their own plight in terms of the wider picture as to what's going on to the NHS, the downskilling, the siphoning away of funding, the cost of private finance initiative, the opportunity costs that involves, and the de-doctoring of healthcare, the making healthcare and NHS harder to access, and the inability to see qualified people. Now that would enhance their case, and that would scare the government. They don't want to hear the rest of the story. They want to keep a very narrow discussion, which the BMA seem very happy to play their role in. And it is self-defeating to keep the discussion on very narrow terms.
It's really quite odd, isn't it? Then that I mean, is it just a lack of political guile? I mean, what's going on with the BMA then? I mean, and do you have a conduit? I mean, could you kind of urge them, advise them, and obviously, hopefully, some of them might be watching the show or listening to the X-Base this evening. But I mean, do you have a route in to advise, to suggest a better tactic that they might employ?
They're not willing to listen. The BMA, like many organizations, are very top down. If you manage to make sure that the people in the top positions are happy to do your bidding, well, then it's game over. And we see this across the union movement. For example, we've seen in Italy unions coming out very strongly in favor of stopping exports to Israel, for example, over the Gaza genocide.
Yeah.
How are unions in this country doing? So, the union legislation seems to have pulled all their teeth. The BMA and other health unions have signed up to the legislation that's gone through, made a half-assed attempt to try and obstruct it. But when it comes push comes to shove, they end up agreeing and saying, well, as long as you do this, you bear in mind some of our warnings. Well, that doesn't work.
No.
So, the most latest example was July 22, where the BMA, the Royal College of Nursing, all endorsed the white paper that was subsequently going to pass and has changed our health service into accountable care, the American system.
Yeah. I mean, what can we? I mean, look, I think it's important that the wider general public don't lose faith with the doctors and continue to support them, notwithstanding the failure of the BMA to perhaps organise a more shrewd tactic. I mean, what can we do? Do you think, Bob? I mean, obviously we've got this X-Base tonight, but what else should we be doing? Do you think? And people listening now, what can they do to as it were, in the absence of a more strategic approach from the BMA, what can people listening tonight do to make the case for the NHS in general, but for the resident doctors in particular?
Yeah, well, I think if people can make the obvious connection between the privatization agenda and how you treat workers within the NHS, that would be a great step forward. And they can make that case on whichever outlet or platform they are willing to participate in. For example, we have national talk radio stations, we have other platforms that they can engage with, because it seems to me there's not enough pushback or certainly a lack of understanding amongst the public. And if they're in health unions or other organizations, they need to be holding their leaderships to account. Why aren't their leaderships really explaining what's going on? There's no excuse.
No, indeed. Well, I know, look, you've been doing, more than your fair share of the heavy lifting, Bob, in terms of trying to raise people's consciousness. I know we always give the great NHS heist, the documentary that you produced, actually talking about what's happening to our national health service. And if anybody listening hasn't seen that, then I think it's really important that you do download. That's available still, isn't it, Bob, on YouTube? Your documentary.
Absolutely, yes, it's on YouTube. Yeah, I think the way people need to get their head round how things are set up is just look at what the Labour Party did to Corbyn in office. You had this bureaucracy which was determined to stop him achieving anything. The same happens within the BMA. I have spoken to people and have been subjected to a similar mechanism of sidelining, smearing, and then ultimately false proceedings to push you out of the organization when you start to say what they are not saying. And this seems to be a playbook employed very effectively across many of the structures within society. Soon as you get a voice that might do what they actually claim to be doing, then they're often silenced or got rid of.
That's very true, and all the more reason why we need to raise our voice and use every platform at our disposal to actually shout as loud as we possibly can about what's happening to the National Health Service and what's happening more generally, really, to the country, to the economy. And it's not as if we are a poor country, is it? I mean, Britain is, as I keep going on about, the 6th biggest economy in the world, issues its own currency. We can have it, or could have, the very best public services in the world, really, actually, or at least it should certainly be the 6th best anyway, if not the best, given that we are the 6th biggest economy, and having that flexibility, as an issuer of the currency. I mean, money is no object really for the government. It's only a restriction really on the government, investing in the public services, in infrastructure, and all the rest of it is the availability of the real resources in the economy. Do we have the trained workers or the unskilled workers who could be trained up? But do we have the raw materials, the machinery, and all the rest of it? That's where I think the focus should be. But we have this ludicrous kind of debate every year about the budget and so on, and the alleged black hole in the public finances. It's all propaganda and nonsense, to be honest with you. We don't have the real debate about what is the main constraint on investment and so on, as I've said, and that is the real resources in the economy. What we've got is a situation, isn't it, Bob, whereby the public services have been turned into cash cows for the private sector, and the National Health Service is no exception to that. And indeed, it's probably one of the biggest cash cows, isn't it, in terms of what's been happening there. And it might just be worth, I think, Bob, just kind of setting out some of this stuff. And I know you've spoken about it previously, and obviously the great NHS heist does go into some detail about this. But, you've said that the doctors or the BMA, could maybe have a more shrewd approach and talk about some of this stuff. But it might just be worthwhile for people who might want to take up your plea for them to raise the banner and speak up on things like, as you say, on these talk shows and talk radio and all the rest of it. Just give us a few pointers of the sort of commentary that they might usefully, bring to bear in any discussions that they have, if they do indeed take up your plea for them to, go and make the case to the likes of talk radio and so on.
Yeah, I think the headlines would be the financial burdens placed on the NHS. So the biggest one is Private Finance Initiative, which is a loan taken from banks and private financiers by the government, borrowing 11 billion, going to pay back in excess of 80 billion, which is sucking money out of the system. And at the end of the payments, we don't own the hospital. So we've had a transfer of ownership and a financial liability imposed on the NHS, which has to be serviced above and beyond the provision of services. So that is quite a big cancer within the NHS. The second big bullet point is the whole marketization of healthcare, the outsourcing of healthcare. which in itself wastes a lot of money. So the contracting, the monitoring, the pricing, deciding on which cases go to the private sector, all of this requires an army of administrators and managers to oversee. And we know that the cost of running the market in 2006 was running about 14%, but the NHS used to cost 4% to run before it was privatized.
Yeah.
So there's upwards of 10% of the NHS budget taken up in market bureaucracy, which is delivering absolutely no benefit to patients. So whenever we drift into discussions about the NHS needs more money, you've got to fix these problems first.
Yes, indeed. I mean, you've made that point in previous X-Space shows, Bob. But of course, the other thing that will confuse people, I guess, is that people see the NHS badge on particular services around about their towns and cities and so on, and I think it's being run by the National Health Service, but that's not exactly the full picture, is it?
Not at all. So if you go back far enough, you had the outsourcing of the ancillary services, portering, catering. Now, if you look at any ambulance going down the road, more often than not, they will be privately run. If you're looking at surgical treatment, well, over half the joint replacements are now carried out in the private sector. I believe 80% of the psychiatric beds are provided by the private sector. So a significant proportion of NHS activity, which is profitable, has been outsourced to the private sector. And they're operating using the NHS logo on their letterwork and on their material that they produce. So the public, unless they're very, very conscious of what's gone on, might not even notice. And this is very deliberate. This is part of the con trick, is to make the public believe nothing has changed, whereas in fact everything has changed.
And just going back to the resident doctors dispute, Bob, and Wes Streeting's reaction, what would your advice be to people who might have the opportunity, to speak to people at work, or as we were saying, get on these talk shows or whatever, or local radios and so on, to his comments about the doctors being a bunch of moaning minis?
Well, I think if you turn your arguments down to personal insults or smears, then that means you're running out of valid arguments, usually in my book. So it might be appealing on the surface to try and ridicule others, but he's actually not coming up with very good arguments. And the BMA are squandering opportunities to raise even bigger and stronger arguments. So that is the problem. But the other difficulty is the journalists that he's able to say this to don't seem to understand anything of the subject either, or they're not willing to go there. So you have ignorant or complicit journalists allowing Wes Streeting to insult and to smear the medical profession at will. That is a problem. If we had decent journalism, he wouldn't get away with what he's saying.
Well, I mean, that's absolutely true right across the piece, really. We've had decent sort of financial journalists as well. I mean, they wouldn't be able to get away with a confidence trick about how the monetary system works, actually. But interestingly, there is some pressure building in that regard. I saw that, just sort of going off the tangent slightly, Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart have this podcast, which is quite popular, and they had Zach Polanski on recently, and they gave him a bit of a hard time, actually. You may have seen the clip going around, and he was talking. I mean, he's got quite a good handle, I think, Zach Polanski has, on the way in which the monetary system operates. And he was pushing back against some of their stuff. I think, he maybe got slightly in a bit of a tangle. I responded to the attack on him, and interestingly, they spent about 20 minutes talking about my response, actually, and I made the point that fundamentally Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell don't understand how the monetary system operates, and they spent a very good 20 minutes, and Rory Stewart himself said he'd spent about 4.5 hours looking into some of the issues that I have been raising, and particularly in relation to modern monetary theory. So it's interesting that, because they're quite influential characters, I think, in terms of the overall sort of political discourse. And, it's worth pushing back, I think, because, they're being forced. Okay, they might not agree with us. They're being forced to, or they feel compelled anyway, but they feel compelled to actually give it a bit more airtime. I mean, previously it was just not being given any airtime at all. So I think that gives me, hope and confidence that encouraging people to raise this question about the NHS could actually have a similar effect in terms of getting a more sensible dialogue discussion about the NHS funding and how it works, and your point, Bob, that you've made about it's not simply about my phone's going off. Simply about throwing more money at it. It's about actually, as you say, actually reorganizing the whole thing, reordering how the whole thing functions. I mean, what's your thoughts about that? I mean, does it give you hope that
I think, yeah, that's a perfect demonstration of the point I was making, where the BMA are missing the opportunity, constantly missing the opportunity to broaden the debate, to shift the boundaries that are set by the journalists and the broadcasters, and to get them onto their own ground, which is privatization is bad for patients, it's bad for doctors, and by the way, that's why you screwed down our wages.
Yes.
It makes absolutely no sense never to attempt that shift in the argument.
No.
And you can only naturally conclude, if they repeatedly make the same mistake constantly, that they're quite happy for their argument not to get anywhere.
No, absolutely. I think it's because people are still, in blissful ignorance about, what's happened to their National Health Service, and it's only when people come to actually use it and they find some difficulties with it. Although people are still very complimentary about the service that they receive, but I think if people understood, what they've done already and what they're planning to go on to do, I mean, I think people would be absolutely horrified. But at this point, Bob, before we move on to the next thing I wanted to kind of raise with you, I just want to just sort of check if anybody listening has got any comments that they'd want to make, or any questions that they would like to put to Bob. I think we've got somebody called Badowski, is that right?
Badowski,
I do beg your pardon. So beg your pardon. I'm misreading the thing there. But Badowski, yes, if you'd like to bring him in then, Alan.
Okay, well, I've invited you to speak, Badowski. You just need to accept it, my friend.
We're just waiting on you, Badowski, to put your point to Bob, if you can hear us. No?
No, I think he's left actually now.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Oh dear,
Okay.
that's a pity. Anybody else is interested in speaking at this point? Alan? No.
No, just but anybody please put their hand up and I'll invite you to speak. Thank
Nice
you.
one. Thanks very much indeed. Alan's just our organizer behind the scenes and keeps us to time and makes sure that I'm inviting people to contribute. It's not just a dialogue between Bob and I. But Bob, I just wanted to go on. I mean, one of the other things that I've seen in the media this week is that the National Health Service is saying that they are having to cope with an unprecedented flu epidemic, and obviously that's putting additional pressure on an already overstretched service. What's your take on the concern that is being articulated now by NHS management about this problem?
The first difficulty I have is accepting anything coming out of NHS England on face value. Could they simply be digging up a narrative to explain why the hospitals are failing so much? There was footage released by ITV. One of their journalists or cameramen walked down a corridor in a hospital, and the corridor was lined with beds of patients waiting to get onto a ward. Now, these were people who had already been assessed, requiring inpatient admission and care, and they were on corridors, unsupervised on corridors. So we know that under any circumstance, when you have, for every 80 patients in that situation, there will be one preventable death. Now, this time of year, it shouldn't come to anybody as a surprise that you have more respiratory illnesses, but we have decimated bed capacity.
Yeah.
So the NHS cannot cope in the summer, let alone in the winter. So if you get rid of beds and you don't employ enough staff, then your government, you need to look at something else to blame. So they shift the blame onto, oh, well, isn't flu season particularly bad this year?
Sorry,
So that's
Bob.
one.
Sorry, Bob. Just let you know, we've got a few speakers now.
Oh, okay.
We've got
Okay.
Badusky, and then we've got Sunai Bazu, and then we've got a Miss Rebecca.
Right. Okay. Then just put them up in that chat, will you? Then for us on my screen, Alan or Chris, who's in the technical back room in the gallery, as it so. So is it Badusky? Yeah. Perhaps you could give the mic to him, as he was first up, I think, to speak. We're just waiting on you.
Badusky, you need to unmute.
We're all waiting with bated breath, Badusky. Okay, well, look, while he's trying to sort his mic out, maybe we could go on to one of the other speakers.
Yes, so it's Sunil.
Sunil, can you?
Hi, Chris.
Hi, mate.
Hi, Dr.
Hi.
Gill.
How's it going?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good.
I'm in North Somerset, and one of our new MPs is a pharmacist.
Right.
Apologies if this is something you've covered already, but can Dr. Gill tell me more about how pharmacists are going to cash in on the next round of privatization?
Sure, yes, a very good question, Sunil. So what has happened is more and more of what the GPs used to do is being shifted over to pharmacists to do. Now the excuse is to help cover workload. Well, the other way of doing that is to increase the number of GPs, but they haven't chosen to do that. So they're shifting work over to pharmacists. The people who are going to do really well out of this agenda are the big pharmacy chains like Boots and others, who are going to be rewarded for every patient they perform one of these new services. It's under the Pharmacy First scheme. Now, it might seem like a good idea on the surface, but I put it to you, if you're putting clinical work down on pharmacists' shoulders who aren't trained in a clinical capacity, well, you're introducing risk. That's the first thing. The second issue is there becomes a conflict of interest whereby the pharmacist is giving advice to a patient for which he may then go on to sell treatments to. So there becomes a perverse incentive to over medicate and over recommend treatment. So that is another issue. But fundamentally, it's about also degrading and reducing the income streams to general practice. So you end up destabilizing general practice even further. Now, the busy GP surgery might not actually see this as a problem at the outset, but often the chickens come home to roost several years down the line. That is the problem. Now, I've spoken to pharmacist employees. We've already seen a downgrading of pharmacy provision. So you have more and more unqualified assistants providing pharmacy services. So there are less and less pharmacists actually working in pharmacies. So they've also suffered the downskilling agenda, and there's a consolidation of control with the big corporates. Again, Boots and others, Lloyd's and all these pharmacy groups that have the ear of politicians are actually rubbing their hands at what the government is doing, destabilizing primary care and introducing them to yet another income stream, which they can offshore the profit, much like Boots does. Boots minimizes tax by offshoring all their profit.
And just want to bring Sunil back in briefly, Bob. I mean, your point about over medicating, this is a feature, isn't it, that you've spoken about in relation to the US system, the American medical system.
Absolutely, yes. It's a common issue when you have privatized medicine.
Yeah,
you're going to overprescribe, you're going to over-investigate, you're going to do more surgeries than are safe to be done. So that perverse incentive is inherent in privatized medicine.
Yeah. So Neil, do you want to come back?
Actually, Chris, I've got one other
Yeah, of course.
question, or I mean, not really a question, but just I just wanted to share this. Again, in North Somerset, there's apparently a massive US medical insurance company setting up a huge office space in the Long Ashton area.
Right.
And it's just staggering to think about how it's like they knew what they're on a schedule, everything's on schedule, and the march towards insurance-based privatized healthcare is they have enough confidence to start.
When did that start, Sunil? When did that project start?
I think it's imminent. I think it's imminent.
Oh no! Well, when did they actually start the the process? It's got to.
I mean, it must have been several years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know precisely.
I just wondered whether it was started under the Labour government or the previous Tory government, but obviously Labour is going along with it either way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, so we've known I've known for over a decade of the creep of the American insurance industry through the form of Simon Stevens, who came to us after 10 years at United Health. And when he left, he was head of global expansion. So there's a bit of a clue there.
Just tell us about United Health, Bob, because people might not be familiar with United Health and so on. Yes,
United Health are the biggest private health insurer in America. They're on in the top 10 on Wall Street in terms of profit generators. They're also quite controversial in terms that they have the highest insurance claim rejection rate of all the insurance companies that provide healthcare in America. So they're even a pariah in America.
Wow. And just to be clear, then, so Stevens then, Simon Stevens, had a senior role with this company, and then went on to become the chief executive of the National Health Service.
Exactly.
It tells you all you need to know, doesn't it, really, about the direction of travel?
And he was the chief executive of United Health Global. He was president for global expansion for United Health.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry to cut across you, Bob, but carry on, mate, with what you were saying anyway.
Yeah, and then we had there's another insurer that's sniffing around called Centene, another American company. And their head of policy then went on to advise Boris Johnson. And I read last week that a senior person from McKinsey's, remember McKinsey is a quite influential management consultancy firm, which has led privatizations across the world.
Yeah.
They have had their advisors within the NHS since the 1970s.
Wow.
Remolding and advising government on how to shift from a welfare state public service provision. Remember, provision is key. As well as paying for it, it was the public servants that were providing the care.
Yeah.
And shifting that over to the American system.
Wow, amazing. So Neil, any other comments you wanted to come back on what Bob has said?
Well, it's always interesting listening to Dr. Gill. Apparently, it's a tech company called Epic, US, but it's connected to the private health insurance industry.
Yeah, so I can tell you about Epic. So Epic make their money by building IT data platforms for hosting patient information, for example, within hospitals. So now our major teaching hospitals in London have adopted the Epic system, which is a data platform. So your electronic patient records are held on an Epic system, but the Epic system is designed for billing. So every interaction that occurs with a patient whilst they're in hospital, from applying a plaster to getting a leg amputated, everything is coded to generate a bill. That is why that system was developed.
Wow.
So you have behind the scenes, now you have the ability to send any patient or insurance company an itemized bill for the care that you received in those hospitals.
Thanks for your contribution, Sunil. We've got another speaker in the audience. Rebecca, would you like to put your point to Bob?
Hi, Chris, and hi, Dr. Bob. It's Becky.
Oh, Becky, sorry.
Um,
I got you down as Rebecca. I do beg your pardon.
yeah, I'm sorry I came late to this podcast. I don't know if you have discussed like the use of AI and the money going to tech companies. But I'm really concerned about that. I had a personal experience last year. My GP had no idea for 5 months that I had cancer.
Oh, my goodness, really?
Yeah, no idea. So letters were going from the hospital, like surgery, oncology, blah, blah, blah. And I discovered on a visit to the GP, they had no idea about this. And what they said, well, I can read the sentence from a letter because I did complain. Basically, due to a massive increase in incoming letters, we have had to resort to an AI system to process them quickly enough to avoid any harm. Of course, this bypasses a human and we all lose out. And so letters are being sent hither and thither. No human reads them, and the AI system failed to pick up any important information. But yeah, during that period of time, my MP in Hove, Peter Kyle, was lauding, along with West Streeting, the benefits of AI in the health service. But having experienced, well, yeah, and if it misses something, it misses it.
Yes.
And nobody knows because no humans involved. And I mean, I just think there's an awful lot of money going to go the way of AI systems. And I mean, obviously, Dr. Bob's a practitioner. I wondered how he felt about it.
Yeah, Bob, I mean, by the way, Peter Kyle is another Labour MP, isn't he, who's sort of in favour of all this sort of stuff, which is, again, totally alien to the, the founding principles, really, of the NHS under Naira Bevan. God knows what Naira Bevan would be making of the present so-called Labour incumbents. But anyway, Bob, what's your thoughts? I mean, how common is Becca's experience as far as you're aware?
I expect it is quite common, but the real issue here is not about improving patient outcomes. Again, it's about redirecting public funds to private companies. Now, AI and the whole hype around AI is reaching such huge levels that, financial commentators expect that it will be the AI financial bubble which brings the global economy down next. We've had the subprime housing bubble that tipped us over the edge in 2008, and now we have a bloated AI bubble. And the reality is the US government and the UK government are willing to push billions into the hands of these AI companies without any tangible proof that any of this will work in a safe way. Now, in terms of the bureaucratic overload within general practice, that is a real thing. And practices are being incentivized to go down this technological fix route. But that has been a road to disaster time and time again.
Yeah.
I'll give the amount of built-in dysfunction makes me weep because there's a huge amount of money being wasted. So I'll give you an example of a patient journey as it used to be and as it is now.
Yeah.
So when we had a GP service and GP out-of-hours cooperatives, patients had nowhere else to go. They had a decent service. They were going to be seen by an experienced doctor, and more often than not, the problem would be solved. Now, what do we have? You can't get to see your GP. You have these other services that are running in parallel, 111, a phone line, urgent care centres, who then see the patient and then may end up sending them either back to the GP or to A&E.
Mm.
Now, I have the huge displeasure of seeing all of this correspondence, and we have to look through reams of paperwork to figure out that actually what the problem the patient had was trivial, and I would have dealt with it within 2 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Without generating any of this paper trail.
Mm.
So we've gone from a very efficient system
Yes,
to a hugely wasteful system,
yes,
where the 111 operator's taking a cut, and the urgent care center, which are privately run, are taking a cut.
yes.
And now the AI operators want to take a cut. Soon there will not be much left to treat patients.
No,
That's the
indeed.
way it's going.
I mean, and just before I bring Becky back, Bob, and your point about how sort of investment in technology has gone wrong in the past. I remember the previous Labour government, actually, under I think it was Tony Blair was still the Prime Minister. It might have been Gordon Brown at the time, but when they were trying to bring in a sort of national unified IT system for the National Health Service. Now, it sounded great in a way, you know, Bob. I mean, I was sitting on a primary care trust at the time, and it all sounded wonderful because, like, if you were, I don't know, had an accident on holiday in Cornwall or something or other, they could just dial up and they could get your details very quickly, and it was going to be much more efficient. But it never worked. Oh, well, I don't know if they've managed to sort it out now, but I know they spent a lot of money and it all fell over. I mean, have they managed to resolve that now? I mean, and is this an example? Is this a sort of portent of where we're going with this AI? Might that fall over in exactly the same way?
Well, the first question should be, is this a good use of money? And is it fixing a very big problem?
Right, yeah.
And the answer to that is no. It's
Right.
not a good use of money, and it will not fix a big problem. It's fixing a problem that might be nice if you
Yeah.
had billions to waste, right?
Yeah.
The program you're referring to is Connecting for Health. Funnily enough, it was something that Simon Stevens was cheering for before he left to join
Right.
United Health and then
Yeah.
to return.
Yeah.
And it was in the tech industry, it made headlines as the most wasteful public sector procurement of IT in the history of IT.
Wow.
So we were a laughing stock.
Yeah.
And
I
you
mean,
know,
as I say, Bob, to me, it's. I mean, look, I'm pretty naive. I'm a bit more worldly wise now, I like to think, thanks to your tutelage, I've got to say, Bob. But it all sounded like a great idea at the time. But in reality, what do you think lay behind it then? I mean, it sounds from what you're saying, it sounds like there wasn't a major problem that needed fixing. Was this just another money spinning proposition for the private sector in the way in which it seems AI is going to be?
well, it's a bit like the wars across the world, Chris. Do you genuinely believe they're to improve the state of humanity from one country to the next?
Yeah.
They are always done on a false pretense.
Yes.
And there's money to be made either through the arms industry or the banks or the private equity firms, or people like BlackRock are go in and cash in after the devastation.
Yes.
It's the same in healthcare. If you
Yes.
are if you move away from infrastructure and personnel and equipment, the more you move away from those essential ingredients, the more likelihood that this is a scam and the taxpayer's getting ripped off and somebody's making a lot of money.
Yes, indeed. Actually, Smedley Butler summed it up back in, I think it was 1935, the former four-star general who joined as a private and worked his way up. And he wrote a wonderful short book called, more of a booklet really rather than a book, called War is a Racket. And he was making the point that, he'd never done any good. He was just a hired hoodlum really for Wall Street. But that can be, I mean, what you're saying, Bob, and I think from our experience, apply right across the piece, really, now. I mean, not just war is a racket, but the whole kind of privatization agenda is a racket, isn't it?
Well, I'll give you another racket. So we know that American students rack up a lot of debt getting through university. Well, don't worry, the healthcare industry have come to the rescue. They've set up plasma donation units whereby they can pay students pennies to suck their plasma out of their system to make health products.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
the extent of how, you know, extreme capitalism is just using
yeah.
the human race to generate a profit. Now, if
Yeah.
that means feeding you crap food and making you sick with a chronic disease, well, big food profits and big pharma profits. There is
Yeah.
no interest. You know, you heard all the hype about a new wave of flu. Well, was that followed with some common sense health advice about taking vitamin C,
Mm,
avoiding processed food, cutting down on sugar, and
yeah.
making sure you lose a bit of weight? Because that would probably be more effective against flu than getting the flu jab.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they're certainly pushing the flu jab. I mean, and just looking at some of the NHS publicity, I mean, they're bemoaning the fact that I think they said only a third of the NHS frontline workers have had the flu vaccination, and they can't, you know, so they're sort of pushing. That tells you a story as well, doesn't it? But Becky, do you want to come back on what Bob has said and any further comments? Is Becky still with us?
Yeah, she's still. Oh, she's. Hold on. She's just as a listener. I've invited her to speak again.
I just feel that obviously AI has uses, but I think there are places where technology is great until it's not, as we all
Yeah.
know with our own little laptop.
Yeah, cool.
You know, and if you get technology failing in a crucial matter, you know, like somebody's life or death, to me, I think it's like the latest way of guzzling money
Yeah.
into private companies.
Mm,
You know, and people like Streeting and Kyle will come out and say, oh, AI is going to do this, and this for you. Well, it might, but it might not, but it doesn't matter because when it doesn't work, nobody's accountable.
no, no,
It's
indeed.
just, you know, an anonymous AI. Oh, apparently I was told, oh, you know, there was a glitch. It wasn't picking up
Yeah.
da da da. Well, great. You
Mm,
know, if it's not
mm.
picking stuff up,
Well,
it doesn't
it's not very
work.
intelligent. It's not very intelligent, then, is it?
No, it's not.
That's the thing, you know.
Yeah,
So,
so I just see it as another route
yeah,
for people. And when this Labour government is done for, which I know can't be long, I shall be fascinated to watch the revolving doors
yeah,
to
oh
see who
yeah.
gets
My
catapulted
goodness
here,
me.
there, and
Yes,
everywhere.
yes, indeed.
So anyway, thank you, Dr. Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much indeed, Becky, and all the very best with your treatment. I hope you know that you
Yeah,
are
no,
fully
this
recovered.
is, I'm a year down the road. Everything's been very
That's
successful.
good news.
And I
Yeah,
say, thank
yeah.
God for the NHS.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you know it will survive for as long as there's folk willing to fight for it, as Nye Bevan said. But I think Badusky wants to try again. I know we've been trying to get you on previously, Badusky, but yeah, it's your turn now. Your chance, probably as we move to the close now, because we're at 10 to 6. I'll make you the last speaker, if that's okay.
Badusky, I've sent you the request. You need to accept it and unmute yourself.
We're just awaiting for Badusky's contribution now.
And before we move on, Chris,
Yes.
the other point about any expenditure is the opportunity cost. So what are you not spending the money on? That's
Yes.
going into AI. The other thing is transfer of liability. So let's say the AI tool makes a lot of mistakes and causes harm. Well, who's going to pick up the tab? More
Yeah.
often than not,
Yeah.
it will be underwritten by the taxpayer. So there's no
Indeed.
transfer of liability. That's the other problem.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Although we could get into a discussion about taxpayer and so on, because actually, you know, it's the you know the government's got access to the resources. So, but yeah, I mean, it's, you know, they could be deploying that money, that public money, in a much more effective way than what they are doing, and that is absolutely letting down the you know the public that elect, you know, politicians to serve the interests of the British people, not bloody private corporations. But Badusky, have we got you on the line now this time? What's happening, Alan?
No, he's. We've got a John Carabiner.
Okay, come on, John. It's your turn. Then we'll make you the last speaker. Then,
John, you just need to unmute.
what's your point to Bob?
John Carabiner.
Have we got him?
He's down as a speaker. He's just not unmuting.
Ah, okay then, mate. Yeah, fair enough. Then. Well, perhaps then we'll just close off then with just get Bob's take on the question time episode recently, where Zach Polanski was talking about it was an issue about immigration actually, and he was saying, look, we've got these migrants who are doing. I think he was saying 1 in 5 of the carers, doing very important and intimate work, intimate support for parents and grandparents. And 1 in 5 of those workers are migrants, and obviously therefore a very important resource. I'm not sure he articulated it the best way, because he was sort of saying, well, these people are, they white people's bottoms. It's not something I would want to do, or many people would want to do. But one of the things, Bob, isn't it, that we're just not paying people properly, are we? I mean, whether they be migrant workers or not, to do this. I mean, I can't think of a more important job, frankly. Caring, providing the most important intimate care for your mum and dad or your grandparents. And we treat them like dirt. I mean, they've been mainly privatized. I mean, are there any that are in the public sector anymore? Very, very few, if there are.
No, you make a very, very good point, Chris. So, you remember David Graeber, the anthropologist? He spoke very clearly on this subject, that the people in our current system who everybody worships and makes the most money actually don't deliver anything tangible to their fellow human being, whereas carers, bin men, all these people, if you took them out of the system, very quickly society would start to fragment. But if you took a few hundred bankers, told them to go away and have a rest, nobody would notice. Nobody would notice. So the reason, I think there is certainly, if you're on very poor wages, you're not going to motivate people to do very challenging work. And believe me, being a carer is very challenging. We want people who have empathy, can emotionally connect with patients, who are caring in nature, doing that type of work. Well, to attract them and keep them employed and give them some job satisfaction, and so they're not working for a pittance in their own time, you need to pay them well. I went to visit, I remember quite clearly, I went to visit a palliative patient who was being cared for at home, and there was quite a distressed carer there, and I sort of said, you look a bit uptight and upset. What's the problem? She says, look, I waited for you to come, but I'm now late for my next client, and I have to get there by bus, and this is taken out of my income. So the clock is ticking. For every time they're on the road, they need to get a certain amount of workload done, and if they're driving, or they have to pay for their own petrol, that comes out of their own money. So it is gross exploitation by a largely privatized system now.
Yeah. I mean, you reminded me actually, Bob, of a book that I read a few years ago called Utopia for Realists, and how we get there by, I think the guy's name was Rutger Bregman. I think he's of Swedish origin. But he was making this point, actually. He referred to the sort of jobs that you're on about there, where nobody would miss, as he referred to them as bullshit jobs. And he drew a comparison with an industrial dispute, and obviously we've got one going on at the moment, where the refuse collectors went on strike. I'm sure it's in New York or somewhere or other. But but people knew about it very, very quickly, and the authorities actually felt obliged to settle actually very, very quickly. But he compared that with a dispute. I think he said it was in Ireland, where bank workers went on strike. And they were on strike for 6 months, and nobody really knows that people managed to find a way through without these people. Interestingly, actually, just talking of refuse collectors and the important role that they play in sort of public health We've had this long going dispute now in Birmingham, where they haven't settled. You know, rubbish piling up, paying scab labour to come in. I mean, I think I can't remember, I won't quote the figure, but it's millions of pounds they paid for scab labour to try and break the strike, rather than actually, you know, coming to an amicable settlement. I mean, what they're on strike for is not for more pay, but just to not have their pay cut, for God's sake. I mean, you know, this is absolutely outrageous. What are we doing in the 21st century? Sixth biggest economy in the world that issues its own currency, for crying out loud, to treat crucially important workers like that. People that we were applauding, again, these another group of people, we were applauding, you know, these key workers that were absolutely wonderful, and then they treat them like that. I mean, my God! But your point is well made, and if people haven't read that book, actually, Utopia for Realists, I can highly recommend it. But it's a valid point, isn't it? I think, Bob.
Absolutely, and I think that's the same point David Graeber was making in his Bullshit Jobs. And you know, he put out a request on a platform to say, look, if you think you're doing a bullshit job, write into me. He was just writing a paper, I think it was, and he was inundated by emails from people who were managers, people who were bankers, people who were bureaucrats, who said, I come to work, there's nothing for me to do. My soul is destroyed. I feel totally useless. I'm getting paid six-figure salary.
Yes,
and
indeed.
that's where the book came from. So, you know, we treat the most crucial people in society the worst because they know they can get away with it.
Yeah, no, indeed, and it's why it's important for all of us to, you know, to speak out and speak up, you know, about this. I'm going to give John Homer one more chance to try and come in before we close. If not, we'll close off. Alan, is John around?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I think the other John was John Carabina, so hopefully you can hear me. I'm John Homer.
Oh, John. Sorry, mate. Yeah, go on, mate, John. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Hi, Chris. And great listening to all of this, even though it's very bad news. I want to talk about the what I'm sure you all agree is the kind of looting of the NHS, whether it be you know, private drug companies, whether it be AI. We've mentioned about the electronic. The amount of money that was Bob was talking about that was spent on this electronic notes system. I worked in the NHS at that time, but what I want to talk about actually is the PFI thing, because it might seem now ancient history, but there's a kind of legacy to this which is absolutely huge in terms of the amount of money that's the NHS is having to pay out to private companies. Now that maybe I'm not sure where they are with the actual mortgage payments, so to speak, they may well have paid those off. But these companies, Skanska is one example of it, they've now basically peed off and they're not doing the maintenance anymore. So the maintenance cost of these hospitals is possibly more than the PFI payments. I don't have the figures on that. But this, you know, this is something that I think was allowed to happen. And you've got to ask the question, you know, who gives out these contracts? Where is their accountability? And it's pretty clear that this same process is carrying on now. And we can talk about corruption in Ukraine, but we've got huge corruption going on right now, whether it be the House of Lords, the House of Parliament. These are the people handing out the contracts. And this looting, this abuse of public services is perpetual. There's a cycle. And we've had it with management consultancy was another one that I think I mentioned to you, Chris, and huge amount of money essentially sucked out of the NHS. But these people just go on and find another way of doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Bob, just briefly then, because we're right at the end of the show now, but just respond to John's comment there.
No, excellent points. The PFA, the historic PFI liability still casts a shadow. We're paying 1.8 billion in the last 5 years just on interest payments. 1.8 billion just on interest.
Shocking.
And the total repayment, interest and capital was in excess of 3 billion. So, you know, it's huge. The ongoing liability is huge. And West Streeting is proposing using PFI2 to build
Yeah.
250 neighborhood health centers
Yeah,
to
indeed.
further
Absolutely.
dismantle and fragment existing GP surgeries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, we're going to close it off at
Yeah.
that. Thanks very much indeed for those comments, John. It's unfortunately we haven't got a bit more time. We pity you weren't able to get in and comment a bit earlier on, but thank you for that, and thanks to Dr. Bob Gill again for his erudite contribution. We're going to be back next week at the same time, so please join us then. But before we go, I just want to do a plug for a film that's going to be shown on the 10th of December in London at the Tara Theatre. It's called Doctors Under Attack. It's about what's been happening in Palestine and Gaza, and a really important film. So if you're in London and you've got a chance to go along and see that, I think the tickets are on sale now. It's the 10th of December. Doors open at 7 o'clock at the Tara Theatre in SW18 in London, wherever that is, somewhere southwest London, I would imagine. But anyway, but thanks again, everybody. So we'll be back next week at 5 p.m. with Dr. Bob Gill. And so until then, have a good evening, and we'll see you next time, I hope.